JJ Corry Irish Whiskey.
Representing JJ Corry, founder and gatekeeper, Louise McGuan. Big round of applause for Louise.
Hi, my name is Louise McGuan, and I am the founder of the Chapelgate Irish Whiskey Company. We are the world's only Irish whiskey bonder. Now, what does that mean? There was a time in Ireland when all whiskey was sold under bond, and it was sold by whiskey bonders. Very often, these bonders were grocers, they were mercantile owners. They sold everything from flour to tea to ammunition to bicycle parts and also alcohol. So they would have port, sherry, they would have wine from Bordeaux, they'd have rum, and they would have whiskey. But for their whiskey, they would take the casks that they had lying around in their shop that were finished, that were spent, and they would bring them to their local distillery. Because back then in Ireland, we had hundreds of distilleries. They'd fill them up, and then they'd bring them back to their shop to mature, and they'd custom blend whiskeys for their customers. Because about 80% of whiskey's flavor comes from the cask it's aged in, and the place where that cask is aged, this meant that there was a huge variety of regional and local flavors in Irish whiskey. This all died out in the 1930s because the Irish whiskey industry collapsed. And we went from having hundreds of distilleries in the 1800s in Ireland to having 4 by 1920. Those few limited distilleries, they decided to control their own route to market. They cut off the bonders, and the bonders, they all died out because they just ran out of stock. They couldn't get it anymore. Until now, we have brought the lost art of Irish whiskey bonding back. And on December 1st, 2016, I accepted onto my family farm our first supply of grain and malt Irish whiskey spirit. I put that into our purpose-built rack house, a bonded rack house on our family farm, and it's sitting there maturing very nicely. Our rack house is custom designed to make the most of our little tiny microclimate. It's the only one of its kind in Ireland. It has a clay floor, which was very traditional, but it's completely gone in Ireland. We're racking all of our casks rather than palletizing, again, something that Irish whiskey just doesn't do anymore. We believe that's important for additional flavor extraction for the long time the whiskey has to mature. And also, we're right on the coast. I'm a quarter of a mile from the Atlantic Ocean. When it rains, I have to go out and wipe salt off of my windows. You know, it's a really briny environment. So when that whiskey is ready, we will have a very unique regional style of whiskey to offer. But it's whiskey. I have to wait. So like any good whiskey bonder would have done back in the day, I've found a source of mature Irish whiskey so that I can get to market. I'm doing it very transparently. I'm a big believer in transparency in the Irish whiskey industry. I have a source of 10, 15, and 25-year-old single malts and 7, 8, and 9-year-old grain whiskey. And I'm blending that. I'm using that as a means to create my own unique style of whiskey. You know, I'm gonna build a house style with that whiskey while I'm waiting for my own stock to mature, but totally transparently. So our first release is called the Gale. It is a blended Irish whiskey. It's JJ Corry the Gale. JJ Corry was a whiskey bonder. He was born in my parish. My father tells me we're related, but everybody's related in Ireland, I think. His relations still live in my parish. He was operational from 1890 until his death in 1932. I have a lot of archival information about JJ. I know where he got his wine in Bordeaux. It was a winery in Saint-Julien, for example. I know where he got his rum. So I'm going to be creating additional whiskeys in the future, additional SKUs that are going to riff off the kind of things that JJ did, but bearing in mind the modern whiskey consumer. We've called this the Gale because JJ invented a bicycle in the 1890s. He was head of the local bicycling club, so he's very sort of forward-looking and progressive. You guys all have a sample there in front of you, I think. So it is a blend. It's a 60% malt, 40% grain blend. That's flipped in Irish whiskey. Blends are normally the other way. This gives it a lot more complexity. It is 5% 25-year-old single malt. It is 55% vatted 10 and 15-year-old malt, and the remainder is 7, 8, and 9-year-old grain. It's very fruit forward. It's an Irish whiskey. It is not trying to be Scotch. We're not trying to be a new craft whiskey. You know, when people turn to Irish whiskey, they want fruit-forward, fruit-bomb flavors, and that's what I wanted to deliver with this whiskey. Our strategy is a super premium one. You know, Irish whiskey, as we know, is growing. The super premium particularly has grown 3,500% within the category in this country. It now comprises 320,000 9-litre cases out of the full 3.5 million that are sold in this country. So that's sort of the positioning that where we want to be. We'll go into key states, we'll go into key cities in those states, we will go deep, we will go after the high-end off-trade specialty stores, and we'll go tactically into some key high-end on-trade for relevance and for visibility as well. We'll be putting 2 boots on the ground in September. We're aiming for a September retail. We will be ready to be on shelf by September. We'll put 2 boots on the ground to support, and I will be spending a lot of time here, much to my husband's chagrin. But that's it. Thank you for having me, and if you have any questions.
All right, well, let's have a big round for Louise.
I got to tell you,
Judges.
I got to tell you one thing, and I think everyone on this panel will agree. You know, the common theme here is, what is your story? And I think so far this is the best story I've heard up here on the stage so far. And if you can get that story out, I think you're onto something. This is like a Ben and Jerry's, or like a Sam Adams, or Burt's Bees, like the clay floors, and it just, it was theater in the mind. I could envision how this was being made, and I think if you can somehow get that out with the right PR and marketing, I think this is a hit. Yeah. I don't know what the rest of the...
You personify the brand, you personify the heritage and so forth, so telling the story, I mean, the passion that resonates through, it was incredible. Category is hot, no doubt about it. It's been growing. We've seen premiumization. We've seen several price increases within the marketplace as a result of supply and demand. So what are your initial growth targets as far as volume, as well as continuity? What's your continuity strategy because there recently have been some new distilleries opening up, but there is still, you could count them with 2 hands as far as distilleries that are currently available in Ireland. So what's your continuity strategy as well?
So there's a big white elephant in the Irish whiskey category at the moment, which is a lack of mature supply. Right, it's a problem. So I have 1-year-old whiskey now, and it's maturing, and I'm laying down stock. So this year I'm going to be laying down more grain and malt. I'm going to be laying down pot still, and I'm going to be laying down peated, and I'm going to keep doing that year on year. It's a long game because supply is an issue for all of us, except for some of the bigger brands, obviously. But for us smaller guys, it's a problem. So if I bottled everything that I had right this second, I would have 12,500 cases, right? If I don't, I can make that last for like 4 years, let's say. And when my whiskey starts to come online and other more mature whiskey starts to come online and the market opens up, that's when you're looking at getting to scale. Like, it's tiny volumes in the early years, but when we get to year 4, 5, 6, and 7, I have unlimited amounts of stock effectively at that juncture. Yeah. And it might be younger stock, but I can really start to ramp up into scale. Yeah. Like, I want to get it to my magic number is 50,000 cases, and that's kind of in the plan, and then after that it can go anywhere. I can't get it there any faster. There's not going to be any more 25-year-old Irish whiskey until 25-year-old time, until 25 years. Yeah. So that's kind of how we're approaching that.
Why do you think supply is going to open up? Because, especially of aged whiskeys, I think they learned in Scotland. We were involved with a brand called Compass Box, who is doing exactly what you are. And you don't have to be embarrassed about not making the Scotch and being a great blender. Whistlepig is a wonderful whiskey doing the same thing. There's no problem. But aged whiskeys, all these big guys are tightening up. They see the value of it. So you need to have a plan for a young whiskey to build that out, because you really can't allow yourself to be at the mercy.
No, what's happening is there's trade secret. There's one supplier of very mature Irish whiskey on the planet at the moment in terms of the really, really rare stuff. But there are a few guys now that have come online, and they have 5-year-old, you know, and that 5-year-old will be 10 years old in 5 years' time. And bearing in mind as well, I'm laying down, I'm buying from different distilleries. So mine is aging and it is maturing, you know, and our profile is going to change, you know, and I think that's okay. You know, this is a batch, this is a 7,500 run, for example. It's going to be different to the next batch because I'm going to run out of vanilla forward, you know, casks or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, so the thinking is that, you know, as we grow, we will be accumulating. The wholesale market is opening up. It will be younger whiskies, but we're all going to be in the same boat in relation to that.
Will you use the same label and try to do that, or will you do a different label for the different blends and style, or will you try to maintain a single style and a single label?
You know, I think, and you know, I know Compass Box does very, very different labels for different things. I'm planning on releasing single casks, and I'm planning on releasing, you know, just single malts as well. So we're looking at differentiating the pack quite significantly, but keeping some of the common cues. You know, this is the original JJ Corry label, like from 1890. Like that's it, and we love that label, and we want to kind of bring that through. So this is the very first run. We may initially start to differentiate it just with color. So instead of using green, we'd use a forward sort of a red. And then once we're established, we can start to really experiment, and we can start to do some really interesting things. But I wanted to go on the market with a hardcore Irish whiskey. I'm all for innovation. I'm all for experimentation. But if I can't prove that I can make, you know, a beautiful fruit-forward Irish whiskey, nobody's going to buy into my mad Compass Box stuff down the line, effectively.
Yeah. Who do you see as your competition, and where are you priced competitively?
Okay, so my competition are the new guard. So my competition really is Teeling and Glendalough, in my mind, just because they have really heritage-driven stuff. They're very brand-driven as well. I look at those guys, and you know, if they're effectively my competition. There's a few other guys coming online as well now, like the Irishman and Writer's Tears and those guys, but they're sort of my competition. And in terms of price point, everybody's moving into, all those guys are moving into super premium. They have a lot of SKUs, and I'm not ruling out having a $40 SKU in the future, but it's way easier for me to go down than to go up. So I want to, you know, get in there at the super premium level and then see, you know, where we land.
I think it's a really interesting story, and I think we got to be very, very careful when you transition into your own stock and on that flavor profile, and the communication of how you're trying different things now, and now here's the standard moving forward, I think is really critical. I will say I do like the package, the width of the package, especially I'm seeing 2 facings on a shelf, and that takes up a lot of real estate. Yeah. It's a pretty good billboard, which is important in any category, but actually in the Irish category, that's not a very large shelf category right now. I think that could really stand out.
You have a great story.
Yeah, I love the
You have a
story.
great story.
Thank you.
Who's your ideal, if you were to put it in a retail store, if you could pick one retailer, who would your dream retailer be?
Sherry Lehman, you know, something like that. Retail stores that have whiskey programs. Yep. I'm touring around, and I'm heading down to various stores down south, actually, who have single cask programs, for example. These are stores that have, they're going to be specializing in whiskey. They have a really good database. They're going to get passionate people behind you who are going to talk about your brand and build the quality cues around that. Yeah. So that would be my sort of thinking.
One of the strengths you have with that brand is, in fact, the flavor. I was noting the fact that the color kind of amazed me. It's on the lighter side, you know, which kind of at first when I was like, look, is this another tequila?
Yeah.
You know, but then the taste is just great. I think if you're going to do the high-end retailer, then you've got to coordinate with him with a tasting project where he's tasting his customers, because I think this is initially going to be a hand sell.
This is a hand sell. This is 100% a hand sell, and you know, even conversations I've been having this week, some people love that and some people don't want to be interested in that, but I'm going to be hand selling this in the first few years for sure. I need to build the profile with the whiskey enthusiasts and with the right stores who have those kind of profile of consumers.
And then on the on-premise side, I think it's actually a fairly, you know, I don't want to say sacrilegious, but it's mixable.
I'm all for it. High-end mixable,
Yeah.
I'm there. That's cool with me. Like, tactically, I want to be in rockstar mixology accounts, you know, and
That's
I want,
what- yes.
yeah, and not every mixology account, but rockstar mixology accounts. Dead Rabbit, I got to be in the back bar in Dead Rabbit, and maybe, and then I want to be in like international hotel bar style as well, where it's a $40, $50, $60 cocktail. I'm totally fine with that, you know.
All right, well, thank you so much,
Thank
Louise.
you.
Give her a big round of applause
Thank
for getting up here today.